So I kind of wonder what the thought process is for a marketing or film or TV show executive right now over at HBO, over at Warner Brothers, when it comes to The Last of Us. Because everything that has happened with this past season shouldn't be a surprise. Like, it shouldn't have been something that really made people go, oh my gosh, we were not expecting this. Like, how could you have not expected this? The proof was in the pudding. And I say the proof was in the pudding because it literally was right there. It had happened years earlier. It had happened en masse. It was a very popular thing that had happened. And yet it's it's weird. The Last of Us Season 2, The Last of Us as a show, is a prime example. It might be one of the most recent primest examples of history repeating itself. Because my God, did history repeat itself here. The Last of Us Season 2, their reviews, they ended up being way worse. The Last of Us Season 2 audience viewership ended up being way worse. And now you have all of these articles and these people who are trying to figure out why. Why did that happen? How could that have happened? And I understand all the gamers and all the people who were, living during that time, playing the game during that time. I understand them laughing at the situation. I understand people kind of looking at it and going, yeah, there's, of course, right? Like, how could you have not? Because gamers weren't surprised. We just weren't. It wasn't something where we were looking at Last of Us Season 2 and automatically writing it off, but there were a lot of gamers, including myself, who were saying, if they go down the same route as the games did, then yeah, people, not just the gamers, but regular audience viewers, the non-gamers, are going to write it off. And I remember a time when Season 1 came out, and that started to become the discourse. And those gamers, those people who kind of knew, were just called all sorts of things. They were treated as if, how could you be this way? You're the problem. You're the issue. You are part of whatever you want to call it, whatever thing that the legacy media hates these days. And yet, most of it, and to be fair, there are trolls out there, so let's not act like there aren't. But to be fair, a lot of us were just like, no, this didn't work back then. I don't know why you think it's going to work now. That's basically what a lot of us were saying. Because The Last of Us, from the first game to the second game, represented a complete bait and switch to a degree that I think a lot of people weren't prepared for, and that the story did not make up for. If you're going to do a bait and switch, fine, but at least have it where your story makes up for it in a major way. Most cases, bait and switches, they don't. And that's why a lot of people hate bait and switches. And we have numerous examples of bait and switches in the last decade, especially in the last decade. But if you're going to do it, make sure you do it right. And I think there was a maybe not false, but I think there was this belief that if anyone could do it, it would be HBO. But even HBO probably wouldn't be able to do it. And it seems like the gamers, the people who knew about this, have been proven right. But what's crazy is I think the bait and switch has affected people even more than we all thought. Because originally, I think the thought process was, all right, well, Pedro Pascal, we all know what's going to happen. Now, I remember saying on, numerous shows and podcasts that we run and things like that, that once Pedro's gone, you're going to have an issue, because a lot of the marketing of the show centered around Pedro Pascal, and a lot of the themes that came out of Season 1, even though they didn't necessarily do the greatest job the way the first game did, a lot of the themes came from a protector type of situation, a father-daughter. They didn't really do that best job of it like the game did, but that's what it came from, that father-daughter situation, that us against the world situation. And the first episode which was you know what the crazy thing about the first episode is? Not to go off on a crazy tangent, but the first episode was almost a shot for shot, and it is still one of the best pieces of television I've ever seen. That first episode, it's incredible, and they do such a great job, and you can see how that first episode would have drawn people in. And with him losing his daughter at the end, you then realize, okay, this is Ellie, Bella Ramsey. This is his new kind of adoptive child. He's going to take, responsibility for her. They're going to develop this relationship. They're going to have that. And that's what people fell in love with. That's what people who are the non-gamers definitely fell in love with. And you were going to see growth from the both of them. Not just from her, but from the both of them. I think that's what a lot of non-gamers thought. That it was going to be a show for both of them, about both of them, where we would get to see growth from both of them. And I understand it. I get that, because that's what was marketed to us. And that's the thing about that. It makes me wonder if HBO only looked at the positives when it came to the second game. Because HBO, the executives, people who would have greenlit this show, they would have had to have looked at the games, right? You're not greenlighting something that is terrible or considered bad. You're only gonna greenlight stuff that is considered good or widely popular. And The Last of Us, I mean, come on. If there was any video game that was going to get a show or a movie, The Last of Us is definitely one, right? More so than like a Halo or that crazy Elden Ring movie that's coming out. But you look at something like that and you go, okay, well, this is getting excellent reviews and everything like that. But it makes me wonder if HBO or Warner Brothers or whomever greenlit it, the panel who greenlit this show, if they looked at season 2, or I should say, if they looked at the second game and only looked at positive reviews without looking at the rest of the discourse. The reviews for Last of Us, the second game, part 2, are so skewed that it can trick you if you don't really know much about the games and you're trying to find your next project. Because if you go back to a lot of the reviews, there are 3 things that are praised. The gameplay, which is admittedly excellent. The graphics, which are admittedly excellent. And then you get to the story. Now, there are some people who like the story. There are some people who hate the story. There are some people who feel the story goes way off the rails, but not in like any type of way that's good. It's almost as if you were just kind of forcing things in. And then there are people who feel like it was very perfect. But one of the things that you start to recognize as you go through the positive reviews is that a lot of the positive reviews started to get away from the game and started to get more into the ideology. Like they kind of wanted to make a point, and they were glad that the game was able to kind of make that point for them. And so you got people who started saying, well, this is the greatest game of all time. But it might have been the only game they've ever played. Or it might be the only time they've ever really dived into a game, and maybe they've played other games before, but this is the only time they dived into this particular game because this fits their particular agenda or anything like that. That happens. That is a thing that happens quite often. You might see a review from somebody who never reviews games. Then they review that one game, and that's all they know. Same thing happens with movies. Same thing happens with gadgets, all these different things. Maybe somebody only reviews these particular things, and then this time around, because it means something to them or they are a part of it somehow, they review this one other thing that has nothing to do with the previous things that they used to review. Like, that isn't uncommon. And so that happened with The Last of Us Part 2. It happened in droves. And I think HBO went, oh man, look at all these positive reviews for this second game, widely considered the greatest game of all time. But it's not the greatest game of all time. And widely would only really be from the critics from a positive standpoint, because a lot of the gamers, which make up way more of the community, were saying, this doesn't really hit the same. And I understand that. That makes a lot of sense, because for a lot of us, it didn't hit the same. And I'm not even a hater of the game. I actually think the second game is fairly good, but there are a lot of things where you got to go, that's kind of weird. Some scratching your head moments, if you will. But man, it's just crazy to see that all of us who played that first and second game, all of us who were kind of there during all of that discourse, during that time frame when media was basically calling out all the gamers and saying all these things, all of a sudden now it's like, well, you know what? Maybe the gamers were correct. Does this prove that I saw a headline. There was a headline out there. It might have been Vox, it might have been Vice, or one of those, where they basically said, oh, does the audience viewership now prove that the second game really was divisive? And you go, well, what? So you needed basically the proof from the gamers wasn't enough. So you needed proof from regular people, the regular general audience. So now that you have that social proof, now that allows you to go, oh, maybe they were right. It's a weird thing. And that's the problem with The Last of Us, especially when it comes to the TV show. Social proof fabrication, omission, misleading trailer edits, a bit of astroturfing, if you will. I mean, The Last of Us truly touched it all. And it's crazy to think that after all of that, now people are willing to believe that the gamers, or more so, they're willing to believe what the gamers were saying back then. Now, maybe it's not so much that they're some kind of ist or phobe. Maybe they actually had a point. And it's funny because, man, I remember really thinking when The Last of Us Season 1 first came out, I remember really thinking, there's no way HBO is going to allow for the Pedro Pascal, the Joel golf scene to happen within the first 2 seasons. There's just no way, because you would be cratering the show by the second season. And this is not, I mean, me, a co-host of mine, Bowman Bridger, who we've talked about it on both of our channels. You can, I mean, literally 2 years ago. So it's one of those things where we just knew, you knew back in your head, you just knew, like, surely you wouldn't do this. And especially when Neil Druckmann came out and started saying, oh, well, we want to get 3, if not 4 seasons. There's a lot of story to tell. And you go, okay, well, you barely told the story of the first game, but now you want to tell way more of the story of the second. But then you realize the second, Neil Druckmann had more power, so he wants more of his story, his game to come out, not really more of the first game where he didn't nearly have as much power. Makes a lot of sense. But man, that's a miscalculation. My thought process was, the Joel golf scene would happen at the end of season 2. I even said that before season 2 came out. I was like, there's no way they're going to do that at the beginning. They're going to wait till the end, draw it out. And you could draw it out. There's enough things that could happen where you could draw it out. Maybe even touch on some things from season 1 again. But like, they didn't do that. They went full blast. Let's get rid of them now and see what happens. And they saw what happened. And apparently they're still going to get a season 3. They're still going to get a season 4 potentially. But man, I don't know where you go from here. Especially if Pedro Pascal, Joel, if he's not coming back, he's got Fantastic Four and a lot of other things down the line. So if it's true that he's not really going to come back, maybe he'll come back in like a flashback here or there, then you really might be in trouble. And now, I don't necessarily see season 3 getting canceled. I could see season 4 getting canceled if season 3 really doesn't recoup viewership. But then you have to ask yourself, how can they recoup viewership? And that's something I just can't see.